Today, we're going to dive deep into the heart of a profound spiritual tradition, Kabbalah. But we're going to look at it through a really unexpected lens, the lens of philosophy and, believe it or not, complexity science. We're on a quest to answer a huge question. Can this massive, intricate spiritual system actually be boiled down to a single, universal command?
Now, our guides for this whole exploration are two thinkers, Dr. D. Weiss and Dr. J. Taylor. We're really looking at a fascinating dialogue between them. It's this incredible attempt to take a rich spiritual tradition and distill it down to its absolute philosophical core. And what they uncover has some truly surprising connections to modern science.
All right, so let's get started with what is a classic philosophical quest. Dr. Weiss, coming at this as a philosopher, isn't just seeing Kabbalah as a bunch of spiritual texts. He's looking at it as a complete system of thought, one that just might have a single, fundamental, unifying principle right at its center.
And this, right here, is the question that kicks the whole thing off. Is it even possible to reduce this entire complex worldview down to its most essential idea? You know, this is the dream of any system builder, to find that one single proposition that generates everything else.
And there's a fantastic word for this, logos. Now, yeah, it literally means word in Greek, but in philosophy, it's this incredibly powerful concept. It's the idea of a single, foundational logic from which an entire system unfolds. So the goal here is to find the logos of Kabbalah. But, and this is a huge but, the very act of trying to do this, of reducing things down, immediately creates a huge problem.
And this is exactly where Dr. Taylor steps into the conversation with a really critical counter-argument. He basically hits the brakes and asks, hang on a second, what do we risk losing when we try to drill down to the basics like this? Is this whole search for a single principle actually destructive?
Think about it with this analogy of language. You start with individual letters. On their own, they don't mean much, right? But then you combine them into words, and then words into sentences, and finally, sentences into a whole book. And suddenly, this rich, complex world of meaning just emerges. If you only focus on the letters, you completely miss the story. So it all comes down to this crucial question from Dr. Taylor. By reducing Kabbalah to a single principle, are we just like reducing a great novel to its alphabet? Do we strip away the very richness that we're trying to understand in the first place? It really seems like we're stuck in an impossible conflict between finding unity and preserving meaning.
But this is where the argument takes an absolutely brilliant turn. Dr. Weiss proposes that there actually is no conflict. The search for that underlying unity and the appreciation for all its complexity, they aren't opposed to each other. In fact, he argues that the unity itself is the very thing that explains the complexity.
And here it is. According to Dr. Weiss, this simple biblical command, this is the logos. This is the sacred heart of the entire Kabbalistic insight. This is the single underlying principle he was searching for all along. But what on earth does it really mean?
Now, Dr. Weiss isn't interpreting this as just a literal command to, have more babies. He sees it as a powerful metaphor for a much larger and much more universal imperative. The command, in this view, is to be incessantly creative, to constantly expand, to constantly develop. And this is the key. You have to get this. The fundamental drive of reality, in this view, is not about preserving things just as they are. It's not about maintaining the status quo. It is an explosive, an expansive command to take whatever already exists and transform it into the next, more complex stage of being.
What is so wild is that this spiritual principle has a mind-blowing parallel in modern science. This idea of constantly moving to a next higher stage is precisely what complexity theory calls emergence.
Emergence is all about how you get surprising, unpredictable new properties when simple things interact. The new, complex reality that emerges can't be fully explained just by looking at the basic bits and pieces. It's that magical moment when the whole truly becomes greater than the sum of its parts.
And this is such a brilliant way to understand it. As Dr. Taylor points out, even if you knew every single law of physics, you could never predict the laws of chemistry. And even if you mastered all of chemistry, you could not predict the emergence of biology, of life itself. Each level is a quantum leap, a totally new order of reality that emerges from the level below it, but you can't reduce it back down.
So now we can finally connect the two big ideas. That Kabbalistic command to be fruitful and multiply, you can think of that as the philosophical engine that is driving the scientific process of emergence. It's the underlying why that pushes reality to make these incredible leaps into new, unpredictable, and more complex forms. Thinking this way has a huge implication for how we view the universe, especially when you contrast this principle of creativity with a bedrock law of physics.
So, science gives us the law of conservation of energy, right? The idea that there's a fixed amount of stuff in the universe, and it just gets rearranged. But as Dr. Taylor notes, that law really only applies to closed systems that are perfectly balanced, in equilibrium. The principle of creativity, this idea of multiplying, describes something totally different. It describes the logic of open systems, systems that are far from equilibrium, where genuinely new things are constantly coming into being.
So what does this creativity need to happen? Well, for one, it thrives in chaos, in non-equilibrium. It needs an open system. Think of the Earth constantly getting energy from the sun. It's not about preserving things. It's about the process of coming into being. It is relentlessly transformative.
And so we land on this really powerful redefinition of a word we use all the time, spirit. In this Kabbalistic philosophical framework, spirit isn't some static thing you can point to. It is the dynamic process. It's that incessant, feverish, forward-moving imperative to take what is and transform it into something new.
And all of this leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought to chew on. If this creative, emergent process is the fundamental nature of reality, then it's not something that just happened in the past. It's happening right now. So the question for us is, what new, unpredictable order of reality is trying to emerge from our world today?